So the reality was it was very quickly realized that there's going to require more work than just a single moment if we're going to do the work of reconciliation in our state. And so businessmen and women and pastors gathered, and they came to the conclusion that they wanted to make a 20-year commitment to one another, to be a part of the solution, to see Mississippi grow in their resolve towards racial healing and moving past the racial divides that existed. And so here we are 30 years later, and the work has been incredible, and we're going to be celebrating that work all throughout today. But one of the things that you will hear a lot about today before we leave this evening is that the work has been incredible, but the work still goes on. And so this gathering is all about that work continuing. We want to continue to grow. We want to continue to deepen our understanding of one another. And we want to continue to grow in our empathy towards one another. And so that's why we are gathered here today, is in order for us to continue to grow. And so with that said, we have a number of things lined up for you. We have a live podcast recording. I don't know, how many people listen to Living Reconciled? Anybody? Excellent, excellent. Well, today you get the opportunity to be a part of the 30th episode of Living Reconciled. Interesting enough, it was God's providence. We did not plan the 30th episode on the 30-year anniversary, but God had great ideas. And so he designed that we would end up scheduling the 30th episode on our 30-year anniversary celebration. And so you get a chance to be a part of this podcast, all right? And so with that said, this podcast today is about friendship. It's about friendship. 3 men, or actually 3 years ago, a number of men started a Bible study, 6:30 a.m. every Wednesday. And they started that Bible study with the explicit purpose to grow in our understanding of one another and to navigate through the divides that separate us. And many of those men had never met before. We were strangers in many ways, but over time we have deepened friendships and grew in our friendships. And so our podcast today that you get a chance to be a part of is about those friendships. And so I am greatly privileged and honored to welcome my friends to the stage. And I'm going to ask them, gentlemen, if you would come to the stage now. Would you give them a round of applause? Now, while you guys are coming up to the stage, I'm going to kind of set the table and ask y'all, if you don't mind, take 30 seconds and introduce yourself to the watching audience. There's going to be time for questions here as we navigate through this conversation, and we'll hopefully have a handheld mic, which we do. Excellent. And so we'll have a couple of handheld mics that we'll use for you guys to be able to chime in and ask questions of us as we go along with this podcast. But this is a podcast, so I got to start it out. I got to announce it. I got to do the whole thing like this is a real podcast, all right? So the recording starts now. Thanks for joining Living Reconciled, episode 30. Brian Crawford here, host of Living Reconciled. My really, 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 really good friends, Nettie Winters and Austin Hoyle. Well, Nettie cannot join us. Miss Tommy is ill, and we're going to make sure that we spend some time in prayer today for her. And Austin is somewhere doing Austin things, whatever that is. But he will probably join us shortly, all right? But I have the great privilege of having on Living Reconciled today 6 of my incredible, really, really good friends. And I want you, my good friends, to introduce yourselves. And by the way, those that are listening on this recording, what you may not know is that not only do I have my 6 friends on stage, but we have several people that are in a watching audience critiquing and judging us right now. And so, with that said, no pressure, guys. I want you to move from my right all the way around and introduce yourself to the audience.
Phil Schank, Mount Bayou, Mississippi.
Ray Sears from Oklahoma City.
Larry Wilson from Terry, Mississippi.
Wayne Hall, Florence, Mississippi. Richard Ridgway, Jackson, Mississippi.
And Jeff Stafford, Jackson, Mississippi.
Excellent, excellent. Would you give them a round of applause again? I mentioned before the start of the recording that this group started gathering about 3 years ago. And although many of us didn't know each other when we started gathering, we've become incredible friends. I'm interested in talking a little bit about the journey towards from strangers to friends. And so what I would like to do is I'd like to start with you, Phil. Could you tell us how this group got started, and probably even a better question, why did this group get started?
Yeah, sure. My wife and I attend Life Church out of Oklahoma City. And she got involved with a small women's group. So I'm kind of a type A personality, so I wasn't going to join a group, so I'm going to start a group. So I thought, well, I'll start a group, and then I thought, well, what do I want to do? And so I thought, why don't we take social issues and drive them through a spiritual lens? And so that's what it's called. And so it got published on Life Church's website. That's actually how Ray got involved, and Dale and some others from the other parts of the United States. And I threw out a bunch of emails, and I said, this is what we're doing. This is when it is. One of the emails happened to go to Nettie. And so then, as you know, Nettie's got a pretty wide net. So he throws out an email. And that's kind of how it got started. And we weren't really sure exactly what we were going to start to process through. So we grabbed a book, one of John Perkins' books in the very beginning, and then it led to another book, It led from, we did The Church and the Racial Divide, which is a 6-week study, and it took us 18 months to get through the 6-week study. So when we talk about going deep and really processing, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you giving us a good segue, because I want to ask you, give us a peek, anybody can jump in, give us a peek into the group dynamics, because there has to be some interesting group dynamics for a 6-week study to last 18 months. So give the audience a peek into what does this group typically look like? How do we poke each other? How do we prod? How do we navigate through these types of discussions? Help them understand what this group looks like on a Wednesday morning.
If you're going to be comfortable, you're going to be very uncomfortable very fast. Yeah. And there's no filter on the Zoom call. A lot of people go to the upper room. We're in the upper Zoom. So it's yeah, preachers for you. But just very uncomfortable, but very a safe place to become healthy in a very uncomfortable environment.
Yeah, it is a safe place. They haven't asked me to leave yet, right? And so I keep coming back for 2.5 years now, and have some of the best friends you could imagine. And this was in a time when we were all COVID bound, right? April of 2021, I started coming because we weren't even going to a live church service. We were watching that online. And I saw this group, and I emailed Phil. I said, Phil, could I be part of that group? He says, come on, and we studied the questions at the end of the chapter, and then one question, it would take us about 3 Wednesdays to cover one question, and so it just and it usually went deep enough, but you felt safe enough once you got to know each other. You felt safe enough that you could explore something deep.
Round of applause for Austin Hoyle, who has just entered the building.
I was late. I wasn't able to tell how many goods you said. I feel like I've failed in my responsibilities. I had to talk to the news.
That's understand. The news is important. Austin was monitoring how many goods I said for Nettie and him, so I don't know how many of you were counting. So you can share that with him later. Pertaining to this ideal of safety and brutal honesty, one of the things that we talk about in Mission, Mississippi, that I even talk about in my church, is that there's a couple of ground rules to having good, healthy dialogue around race. One is that vulnerable conversations must exist. And if you're going to have vulnerable conversations, then you have to allow for the lack of polish. Most of the time, people want to have conversations around race with polish. And so if something comes out wrong and everybody wants to bash the person who said it and kill the conversation, you can't get vulnerability and polish. You only choose one or the other, right? Yeah. And so what we've decided as a group is that we choose vulnerability over polish. And because we choose vulnerability over polish, there can be some outlandish things said on Wednesday morning, and we totally allow that to go, right?
Right.
Would you agree with that? And what have you learned about your own journey in relationships through that?
I want to back up just for a second, because when we started, do y'all remember when we did the, hey, tell us about yourself? And how incredibly shallow it was? It was so bad. You know, like when we did our intros, Phil from Mound Bayou. You know, it was basically like that. Nettie said, it was probably a year and a half or so into it again. He said, why don't we go back through and do this again? Oh my word. It literally, I think we'd get through like one person in an hour, you know, just sharing. And we sat there and we went, why didn't we do this in the first place? It was because we needed that space to be created to where we could feel vulnerable enough to go ahead and really share. And here's who I am, and here's who you are, and you know, and then learning how to love one another through all of that. It was extremely powerful.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, since you mentioned unpolished, unvarnished, and since I'm the least polished and least varnished in the group, I think the thing that I learned the most is that as we're sharing, we're unguarded. We take the guard down. Many times when you come into a group like this, people want to put up what should be the answer, what should be the response. But we've come to a point now through, you know, pain and problem and dealing with the issues of the day and the challenges that are there, where we can just say, this is what I actually feel. Mm-hmm. Without it being judged, without, you know, having anybody look at you and say, why do you think that? Now, the person in the room that's going to look at everybody and say, well, why do you think that, is the unpolished, unvarnished person, but see how they all look nice and polished, and I got my work clothes on. But we have honest, very transparent, very truthful, and sometimes very painful conversations. Yeah. But we feel safe enough that we can have that conversation and still love each other at the same time. So the thing that I learned the most is that genuineness, that oneness that we have created is what's needed in the state of Mississippi.
Yeah. So I think the dynamic, no, it's not working. Here, I'll swap. I think the dynamic, though, that we got to, is that working? Yep. Occurred over time, and there's two things. One is, I think every man in the group is theologically sounded in our faith. Right. Therefore, there is a dear respect for one another, and an immediate care for each other. So you've got the levity to say what you want to say. But in time, the fellowship strengthens into a love for one another. So I really don't care what Jeff says. I really don't. I love the man, and so therefore, when he says something that shocks my conscience, I've got one friend that...
And he definitely has said some things that shock me.
And there was one I'll say, I agree with Jeff, and they'll go, you agree with Jeff? Yeah, it is. You know, when you come to a relationship of loving another one, you care about what they say, and you take it to heart in a different way. But he'll stir the pot, and there are several of us that do. Nettie will stir the pot sometimes. Nettie drug me into it. Nettie and I've been friends for 30 years or whatever. And he said, you ought to join this thing. And I thought, I ain't got time for another thing. But this is a sweet richness in the week that I look forward to, because it's a brotherhood. And now we get on the phone and we laugh and cut up. and we poke fun at each other, but it's deep. We know where we're going with this, trying to see what the Lord has for us in strengthening the church and binding it together, and that's a work.
I appreciate you guys talking about the amount of time it took to get to a place where our stories were honest. And I don't know how many of you guys in the audience know, but it's not just a matter of you putting on a mask for the people that you engage regularly, but oftentimes you mask yourself from yourself. That there's a sense in which you don't even know that you're not being honest. And so you kind of tell these little surface level stories, not even realizing that there's a level of depth. And what happened, I don't know if you guys recall this, but what happened as we were telling these stories, what we all came to realize, or many of us came to realize, is that I've never shared this before.
Yeah.
That I'm going deeper than I've ever gone before. And it took time, longevity, it took friendship, it took a sense of safety to draw some of these things out of me where there's a sense of pain, or there's a story of hurt, or there's something here that I've never talked about before until I had the kind of freedom that love brought, right, through this brotherhood. And so I would encourage you to even just think about the fact, ask yourself, let me say it this way, ask yourself, do I have the kind of friendships, not just even across dividing lines and racial lines, but do I have the kind of friendships, period, that is drawing the things out of me that sometimes I withhold from myself? Do I have the kind of safety? Do I have the kind of place of vulnerability where I can just really let it all out? Because there is so much nourishment and so much healthiness in being able to have those kind of friendships and relationships that can draw that out of you. And so I appreciate that, brothers, in the sense that I feel like you have drawn things out of me that I've never even shared with other people. And so I really appreciate that. Among the joys like that, could you share some of the joys that you've had as a result of this morning brotherhood?
I mean, I could. I've got a little grandson. He's going to be 3 pretty soon. And he was born as a COVID baby. His mother got preeclampsia. And when he was born, he was 1 pound. And so he went to I gave out pictures today. You can't tell, right? So when you go into the NICU at 1 pound, there's not a real good chance that you come out, you know. And just the other day, my daughter took him in to see his new pediatrician, and she's the doctor who admitted him to the NICU 3 years ago. She said to Katie, "Do you remember me, Dr. Corey? Oh my goodness, that was the worst night of my life because you told us that Cooper was not going to survive." And so I've shared his progress with these guys from the time, he got out of the NICU after 1 year. Then he finally got the tracheostomy removed after another few months. And the prayers that they've brought up, and this isn't just for, we share prayers amongst everyone with our problems our wives have had, our families have had. So that's the joy, is that, somebody says, why does he have cerebral palsy, and why does he have these problems? And it's, I think the Bible says, so the glory of God can be shown through him. And you would not believe how many people, are that the glory of God is shining.
I would echo that, what Ray was saying. These guys really reflect on earth as it will be in heaven, by the simple fact that we may go, several weeks, in my case, several months without being on the calls, and we still talk to each other. Like we've seen each other this afternoon, like it's just yesterday we saw each other. And we've really established the fact that it's okay to look different and still serve Jesus together. And I've learned that from these men, that, you look after each other, you take care of each other, and that's the church. It's not like, hey, what denomination are you again? Or what church do you attend? It's no, hey bro, I got your back, and it even comes down to, just picking at each other about sports, golf, just anything. But it's more than just a Wednesday call. These are outside of the week brothers that the church models so well on Wednesday and Sunday, but doesn't even connect outside. This is more of a family the way I believe the way God intended it. And that's what I love about these men is I can honestly say that the men on this stage truly have my back and I have theirs. So.
Yeah, you talk about golf, man. I mean, we'll say the names obviously because that's not important. But just thinking about this group dynamic, there was a need that came out of this group where there was like, hey, we got some kids that need some golf clubs, and just put it in the chat, put it in the group. Hey, anybody have any old pair of golf clubs? And before you know it, in 5 minutes, these kids' needs are met in that regard. And so there's a sense in which, this brotherhood is for us, but in this brotherhood, even other people are being served and being nourished. And so when you think about what are you, why do I unify? What motivation do I have to actually connect with people across dividing lines and racial lines? What motivation do I have? Yes, there's a sense in which you will be served and you will be richly blessed, but I don't want you to undermine the fact that there's a lot of times that just this union in and of itself is going to produce fruit for so many other people that have yet to be known and yet to be seen. And so there's an incredible blessing and joy that other people will receive through that unity as well, and we can't miss that.
Just on that, and I'm not trying to steal anything from your keynote later, but it's one thing to get in the room together.
Yeah.
It's a completely different thing to share experiences and burdens of others. Does that make sense? And that's all I'm going to say, and I'll let you expound on that later. But that's what we're in the same room together, or Zoom. But it was cool. 2 years ago, we go over to Richard's house. Dale, who is that big, lanky, white guy on the left there.
That dude does not look that tall on Zoom. Let me just tell you that. It was shocking how tall that man was when I met him. Shocking.
Kind of forgot about how big he is, and that's Johnny Beeson next to him. Anyway, that's at Jeff's house. But we went to Richard's house on Friday night, so everybody's flying in from all over the United States to get together for dinner at Richard's house. And then on Saturday, we did this men's conference over at Jeff's house. It was wonderful. It was the first time we had really ever met face-to-face. But how cool was that? And then we come together and there's this brotherhood and we just keep going and keep going and keep processing, keep talking, keep sharing, keep, carrying each other's burdens, everybody's experiences, praying for one another, that kind of thing. What's interesting now is it's almost difficult for people from the outside to then get into our group because we get requests, and then I'll tell people, and this is one of the problems, but I'll tell people what we're doing with our group and how we're addressing, racial issues and so on. I had one guy out of Tulsa tell me, well, I don't believe racism exists, anymore. And when you guys want to talk about Jesus, and I actually got a hold of Brian. This was a year ago. And I said, bro, I cannot contact this guy. This is not going to go well if I contact him. I'm like,
Phil can be an angry white guy.
I'm like, you wanna contact this dude and talk to him? Because it will not go well if I do. Because there's going to be righteous anger that is going to fly through that phone, especially with Tulsa. Like, do you not even know your history? Like, anyway.
He's getting riled up.
I was about to say, he's fired up right now. Yeah, he's fired up right now. Yeah.
So at any rate, I have very little patience for that type of stuff. But we're having a hard time we get requests, hey, I want to join. Yeah, okay. And then I'll tell everybody what we're doing. And they're like,
That was a fun call. Thanks.
yeah, yeah. Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I'll keep looking, and it's like, doesn't God care about reconciliation? I'm pretty sure it's biblical. This was kind of a big thing on his heart, so shouldn't it be on ours? And why don't we spend more time talking about it in church and talking about it? If the church was really to talk about it and address those things, we might be able to change something. We talk about the church being the most powerful, mechanism in the world and so on. Well, the church is us. Yeah, so
but there's a dynamic to standing in our own shell. We know what we know, and how do I know how to interact with my wife? She sees the world differently than me, and so being married in a covenant vow with her, I have to listen to her tell me how lame I am at times and not understanding. It's the same dynamic with this. How am I going to know Jeff's experiences, Larry's experiences, Bride's experiences, if I don't get into that fellowship where the honesty can occur? I am wrong if I think I have all the understanding. So it is literally about learning learning who we really are, to share each other's burdens. It's a deep thing. It's sweet.
When this podcast goes live next week, there'll be people listening like, is that guy like in the audience talking? Because Richard is like in a competition to keep the mic as far away from him as he possibly can. He's like holding it out here. I'm sorry, I had to rag you, man. I was just thinking about it.
That's a good Presbyterian.
As a good Presbyterian would.
They just
As a good Presbyterian would. It's like it's so loud. It's so loud. Look at this. He's trying to keep it away. Oh man, yeah, we're good brothers, by the way. So there you go. Hey, I want to open this up to the audience. If you guys good with that?
Yeah.
Want to open this up to the audience if you guys don't mind. And anybody got any questions for this group?
Before you ask your question, I want you to understand this dynamic. We meet on Zoom. For most of us, this is probably fifth, maybe sixth time we've seen each other in person. And for some of us, it's the very first time we've ever seen each other in person.
First time.
And we have shared everything. Joys and pains and cries, children's issues, family issues, relational issues. We cover it all. And that's having seen each other less than 6 times. There are people who live in homes for 20 years
That's good.
that have never shared as much as some of us have shared in this space. That is a testament to the power of Christ
Yes, it is.
and racial reconciliation.
I'm the new kid on the block. I came in December, I believe. I looked at a text message that Nettie sent to me. It was on the 27th of December. This is my first time seeing Jeff live.
And we both live in Jackson.
And this is my first time ever seeing Ray live. I'm the new kid on the block, and I just came in through Nettie. Nettie had someone from our ministry that put an application in, and he called me about that person because I was put on the application as a reference, and he hired the person, and most of you know her name is Felicia. And
Shout out to Felicia Bowles.
yes, come on. And he called me back up after some time later, and he said, do you have another one like that in your church? And I told him, no, we do not. And so from that, we start meeting. Nettie and I start meeting together, having lunch on Tuesday. And then he told me about this group, and he invited me to come. Now, you got to realize I'm retired, minister, but I'm retired, so I don't have to get up early in the morning. And when he told me 6:30 in the morning, I'm going, oh, my, that's going to be a challenge. But I grant you, I get up at 6:30 on Tuesday. At 6 o'clock, I get up. Then we have to set an alarm clock because of what I get from this group. It's not a chore, a challenge for me to get up at 6, to get ready, to go online, to hook up with these guys. Authenticity is the word that I was thinking as they was talking, and that's what I see when we get together. Everybody's real. We don't talk about denomination. The only time they talk about denomination is when Ned is picking on Richard. That's the only time you hear any denomination mentioned, and it's just a joke, just to pick on him. But authenticity, being real, you don't have to put on the air. Everybody up here is a theologian, all of them, but they don't come across like that. They are genuine, they are real people, and we have real issues, and we're able to share that. and build a relationship across all those lines. Those things are just not there. And I appreciate every one of them, and getting to know them and being, like I said, the new kid on the block. It's been awesome. I remember one person that he invited to come on the group. I don't know what they was expecting, but it was so deep for them that day and so real, so authentic, that person never showed back up. And that's where some people are. They want to be on the surface. They don't want to get deep.
We are kind to them, though.
Yeah.
And so the new rule is that whenever a person comes in, Jeff cannot speak.
Yeah, Jeff. We keep Jeff quiet. But what you guys are highlighting is a very, very important point, right? Which is, we all have to take a journey into the pool, right? And so when you have a group that's already swimming in 10 feet deep, it becomes incredibly hard to bring someone in from the shallow waters that fast. And so one of the things that we want to encourage is that there needs to kind of be this cycle of, now you go and do likewise, right?
That's good.
So like we've cultivated what we've cultivated, and so our hope and dream is that all of us in some shape, form, and fashion would go and do likewise and produce this again, because it's hard. We've talked about it over and over again. It's hard to just say, hey guys, just jump into this, because there's been so much blood, sweat, equity that has been poured into this that it becomes incredibly difficult to just start fresh and jump into it like this. So that's one of the things that we don't want to miss, because there is such a blessing that comes in the journey that we've had, right? And sometimes you don't want people to miss that journey. So before I jump into another question, I do want to pause and make sure that we didn't have any from the audience. Yes, we gotta get you a mic.
So you were talking a minute ago, saying that basically, I'm paraphrasing, sometimes we're ignorant, right? Like we don't realize we're lying to ourselves. And so maybe there's some type of just ignorance there, right? So when you all are in this group and you have one of your brothers that's being that person, like they don't realize that there's a lie, or maybe it's something, a racial issue that you just don't realize is there. Okay. So how do y'all deal with, like, if it's me and I don't realize it's there, I'm kind of, your first step is maybe to be a little defensive of like, no, whatever. How do y'all deal with that confrontation? Or I know you said that we're going to keep it real and we're going to love one another, but I know it's not as easy as that's what you're saying right there. So how are y'all able to do that and not have offense? How are you able to do that? And I guess to not diminish what is going on, but to really to talk through it and it not escalate into something more.
You've offered an incredible segue, because one of the questions I was going to ask after we sent the mic to the audience and it came back was, what is one of the more challenging moments that we've experienced? And I think that's going to draw that out. And so you guys don't mind, talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we've experienced in conversation and how we've navigated it.
I mean, I've had that because I'm the Yankee who came and married an Oklahoma girl, came from Boston and ended up in Oklahoma. And so it's a whole new world. And I think, well, I'm the virtuous Yankee because, we didn't have racial problems in Boston and Cape Cod. And then I come to find out, veterans who were black who got out of the military couldn't use their VA benefits to buy a house or to go to school. I didn't know that. And then I find out that, on Cape Cod, which is a little hamlet, no one would own a slave there, right? There would be no enslaved people. There were Native Americans who were enslaved. There were blacks who were enslaved. And you think, oh, I'm from this virtuous part of the country. And you find out, well, actually, when you dig in, not so much. And we're still digging it up today. We're still finding out today. So what I would do is, you can't always solve it when all six of us are online. So I've got everybody's phone number. In fact, the other day, I'm so privileged and honored that I could dial up a guy who's the president of Mission, Mississippi, and he would answer my call on like the second ring. And he would say, hey, Brother Ray, what do you need? And I said, well, I just need to know where to be when, And so, that's a privilege. But so I think I've talked to nearly everybody, Jeff, and I know to Nettie and to Johnny Beeson, one-on-one. Because if you couldn't figure it out in the group, you can figure it out and say, I didn't, what happened? And so you can do it one-on-one. So you need that. You need everybody's number.
I think you've introduced a very important point too that Ray has kind of spoke to in terms of, dialing down the number of people engaged in the conversation. There's also this reality that if we engage in relationships with the assumption that we, after rigorous debate, will all come to agreement, then we are going to be very sad and very angry. We enter into most of these discussions realizing that, we probably will walk away from this one and all of us are not going to agree on this. But that is totally okay. One of the things that we try to drive home here is that agreement is not always the goal. Understanding, empathy, and love is. And so if you don't grow into agreement by staying at the table with ears and heart open, you will at least grow in your understanding, in your empathy, and your love. And so we have all kinds of conversations around all kinds of stuff. Politics are on the table. Economics are on the table. Health disparities are on the table. Anything's on the table. And we when we put it on the table, we're not putting it on the table to win an argument. We're putting it on the table to help you see my side, to help you see my vantage point, to put you on my side of the street so you can get a different perspective, in hopes that it will not, even if it doesn't give you agreement with me, it will at least increase your empathy and your understanding of me. Would you say that to be the case?
Yeah, there's often disagree.
You put a lot of emphasis on that often.
What I envision, though, in my heart is that while two of us, or two of them, let's say two of them, are going back and forth, the others of us are gaining perspective and greatly pray. Amen. It's real. Amen. There's been times when me and Johnny
It's not here. Then
and so I won't,
in America.
right.
Yeah, absolutely.
We walk through some of the same troubles, but we see the solutions and the outcomes different. There have been times when me and Richard, we've had things where we've had to say, well, that's the way I see it. I get it. And I don't have to agree with you to love you.
Absolutely.
What I have to do is appreciate you. That's it. We don't always have to agree. And we bring everything to the table. If it happened in the news and it had some level of racial tinge to it,
it's a conversation.
it's coming to Wednesday morning. Some of us wake up ready for Wednesday morning. I'm not saying any particular names. Just saying some of us.
On those mornings, Jeff has his camera on, his teeth have been brushed, and he's washed his face and greased his scalp. He's ready to go, man. He's ready to go. We're wrapping up here, and I'll give this question, and then I'll give one more question to the audience. But we've been doing this for 3 years. That requires an incredible amount of resilience to just stick with it for 3 years. Share some of the things in which you feel like have been keys to actually us just being present for 3 years and coming to the table every week, fully engaged, ready to lock arms and pray together, study together, grow together, challenge each other, Give me some of the keys as to how we've been able to hold this.
Well, I know for me, like, having some times being out, it's kind of like going to the gym. It's the days you don't want to go is the day you need to be there. And that, for me, has been so crucial to going back to your question. Sometimes you just have to know you're going to have to be vulnerable, and it's going to take time. And sometimes when you're vulnerable, you're going to get offended because it's like healing. We're good at putting Band-Aids on things, but when you expose it and let it get air and heal, you're thinking, well, maybe the scar won't be as bad. But I think it's just being willing to be vulnerable in the moment, knowing that, yeah, we're not going to win this in a day, but it's going to take time and it's going to take effort. And if I continue to come to the table, even when I don't want to be there at 6:30 in the morning, Brother Larry, I feel you on that, with 3 kids and a wife that's in school, it's just like, one more time, okay. But I'll just turn the Zoom on and take my video off, But we've all done it. But it's just choosing to go when you don't want to be there.
I'm by nature non-confrontational. And when I started meeting with Nettie Winters, when I first met Nettie, I said, I don't know if I like that guy. But what happened when he introduced himself to me and we started meeting, I got to know Nettie. And something Dolphin had always said, stay at the table. And I stayed at the table with Nettie. I found out Nettie's a great guy. I saw the other side of Nettie. I saw its vulnerability in our relationship, just the 2 of us meeting. And so when he introduced me to this group, me being confrontational, I watched Jeff. And Jeff is that guy, he gonna let you know. And he's confrontational. And I asked Nettie about him. So we've been vulnerable right here before you now. And he didn't really give me an answer. And I'm so glad he didn't. He didn't let me hear what his opinion of Jeff was. He let me formulate my own opinion. And what I discovered about Jeff, I need a Jeff in my life. Jeff is the guy, he gonna know what he's talking about when he talks. He's gonna captivate your attention. He has done his research. I know things about African-American people that I didn't know until I met Jeff.
We're African-American.
I'm African-American. So I need Jeff. And I have learned to appreciate him because he brings it from another view, another side. Sometimes I look at it one way and Jeff calls me to look at it another way. And we need that. And then I need my brother here to show me a different angle. He said something one day, he still don't know what that is, and I'm not going to tell you, but he said something that he was going to do. I'm going like, really? But that's who he is, and we don't judge each other like that. And Richard just brings something unique to the table. He's a theologian. He don't know that, but he is. And he has a way of bringing God's words into it. So everybody at this table here has something to offer to help me to grow, develop, become the man of God that God has created me to be. And I'm grateful because I need to iron sharpen iron. And only way, it's going to be some sparks when that happens. And sometimes there's sparks in this group, but we'll never get sharpened unless those sparks happen. Yeah.
Before you go, let me just give you, this is kind of how a morning can go sometimes. We're having this great discussion and so on. And when school's in session, Jeff is getting ready. He's getting his kids ready. He's listening. He'll throw something in the little chat thing or whatever. And oftentimes it's so provoking what he sends in the chat. I'm like, well, we need to get, and then Nettie will see it and he'll go, Jeff, you're going to need to unpack that. You need to get on this thing and you need to, this, that, and everything else. So we'll get to about 7:05, Jeff's in the car and he's going. About 7:15, 7:20, we think we're about to wind it down. And Jeff will go, well, let me chime in just for a second. I kind of see this a different way.
Everybody goes on mute.
Yep, and so we just But to what Pastor Larry's saying, perspective.
Perspective.
And all of a sudden you sit there and you go, I didn't think about that. I didn't think of it that way. Why didn't I think of it that way? Is that something like you were maybe alluding to? Is that something inside of me that,
Come on.
am I just blind?
Yeah.
You know, or did I just never think of it that way? You know, so it's rich.
It's rich.
It's super rich. Go ahead.
When we first got started, probably about 6-7 weeks in, I think I called Brian. I said, Brian, I got about 2 more weeks in here. Give him about 2 more weeks. When we started, much of the conversation was me, Brian, Nettie, and Johnny going back and forth at one another, trying to tell the African American story to a group of white guys who were just laughing at us or listening to us or trying to love us. But there was a tension because I knew that it meant that they had something to say, but they did not know how what they were going to say would be received. And I said, I cannot do that. If we are going to be what we are saying we're going to be, we're going to have to come and be iron, sharpening iron. Not only do you have sparks, you have melt. And we needed to melt. And it went for a week. And then I said, we'll give them another week. And then the next week, providence of God. I'm Presbyterian, brother. I'd simply raised the question, and they began to speak. And that's how I knew that God had put this together. And it was God's providence, and we were able to go from there.
A thing within the church that
Yeah, you can clap.
something you still rejoice over. There's this fear I've got in the church that people sit down with their faith and they say, I'm saved, thank you for Jesus, and they leave it there, and they do not remember, as that 1 Thessalonians 4:3 says, the will of God is your sanctification. This is a sanctifying thing.
Yes. Yes.
Grows us in grace
Yes.
to be more like Christ, and it teaches us how to love someone that's not like me. Yeah. Sweet.
It's sweet.
One of the keys here that you guys, I hope you've heard it as you've listened to these gentlemen. But one of the keys to our discussions, we mentioned that vulnerable conversation has to be unpolished. You got to choose one or the other. So vulnerable conversation is the quickest way to gain ground. That's how you gain ground. That's how you establish friendship. That's why Jeff is like, hey man, I'm giving it 2 more weeks and I'm out, right? Because he's like, hey, I don't have time. We're not gonna get anywhere. I don't have time to just kind of be pontificating in a room. And so gaining ground was part of that drive and that motivation, and vulnerability from all parties is how you get there. So vulnerable conversation is the quickest way to gain ground, but harsh conversation is the quickest way to lose it. We are incredibly vulnerable in this circle. We are never harsh to one another. That's right. You have to understand that when you talk, there are things that can easily rouse your anger, right? But mismanaged anger is what leads to harshness towards one another. What we understand is passion in our discussion.
There you go.
And so when something riles us up, it's not because any of these individuals here are evil. It's because I'm passionate about the conversation that we're having. And so I'm going to lean in and I'm going to manage and steward my anger in a healthy way towards making sure I articulate passion in the conversation and not allow it to lead to harshness. because harshness will destroy anything that you're trying to build as it relates to cultivating these relationships across dividing lines. The reason why our culture is so chaotic right now in trying to cultivate these relationships is because we have incredible propensity towards harshness. We just like to have conversations in the harshest way possible. We pot shot each other in social media. You know, all of our commentary leans towards harshness, and it's the quickest way to destroy ground. You never get to understanding that way. And so this group has been able to maintain through the, for the long haul, through all of the challenges, because we are incredibly vulnerable, but we are not harsh to one another. That's it. We are not harsh to one another. It is 4:04, and you guys have breakouts to attend. And so let me ask you, if you don't mind, giving my good friends a round of applause.
Do that.